It started in the quiet countryside, where the cornfields stretched as far as the eye could see, and the wind carried with it the smell of freshly cut hay. Sarah Collins had always been the quiet one in her town. A farm girl raised with old values, she knew how to rise before dawn, milk the cows, feed the chickens, and push through the exhausting labor of rural life without complaint. But no matter how hard she worked, or how kind she tried to be, she could never quite escape the sneers, the whispers, the cutting glances from people who thought she didn't belong. For Sarah was different. Her skin was pale, her accent soft, but she came from a family line that many in town had judged and gossiped about for generations. The hatred wasn't new. What was new was how bold the Bullies had become. It began with muttered insults when she came into town to sell produce. They'd call her names under their breath, sometimes throwing little rocks at the back of her truck as she drove away. Sarah learned to keep her eyes down, her hands steady, her smile polite. But deep inside, she felt the weight of their cruelty piling up like storm clouds on the horizon. She told herself to endure because her husband, James, wasn't there. James was more than just her partner. He was her shield, her strength. But James was away. Delta Force had called him back overseas, leaving Sarah to keep the farm running alone. He trusted her strength. She trusted his promise, "I'll be back, no matter what." But the Bullies had been waiting for such a time. At first, it was just 3 of them. Teenage boys who had grown into bitter young men with too much time and too much hate in their hearts. Their leader, Kyle, had a sneer that never left his face. His 2 friends, Marcus and Brett, followed him around like shadows, laughing at every cruel remark he made. When they saw Sarah at the farmer's market, they'd taunt her about her farm, about how her kind didn't deserve the land they lived on. One day, they even tipped over her crate of tomatoes, smashing the ripe fruit into the dirt, while people around her only watched and chuckled. Sarah bent down, gathered the ruined produce, and bit back tears, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She wanted to believe it would stop there, that maybe their cruelty was only empty noise. But hate has a way of growing when no one stops it. The threats escalated. They painted vile words on her barn one night. She scrubbed them off alone before dawn, her hands raw, tears mixing with soap and sweat. They shot pellets at her chickens, leaving 2 of them injured. Sarah buried the birds quietly, whispering apologies she should never have had to say. She wanted to tell James, but how could she? He was risking his life overseas. He had enough on his shoulders. She told herself she would endure just a little longer until he came home. But endurance has limits. The night it happened. The sky was clear, the stars burning bright like watchful eyes. Sarah had just finished locking up the barn and was sitting by the window with a book, trying to distract herself from the gnawing loneliness of the house. That's when she heard the sound, laughter outside, low and cruel. Her stomach turned cold. She set the book aside and stepped onto the porch. 3 figures stood at the edge of the field. Kyle, Marcus, and Brett. Each of them holding something. She couldn't see what, but she could smell it, gasoline. Her voice trembled, but she forced it out. "What do you think you're doing on my land?" Kyle's grin widened in the moonlight. "What we should have done a long time ago, farm girl. You don't belong here, neither do your kind. Time to send a message." Before she could move, before she could scream, one of them lit a match. The whoosh of fire came alive as it hit the gasoline they'd already poured along the porch railings. The flame spread like lightning. Sarah gasped, stumbling back inside as the fire raced up the wood. She tried to grab a bucket to smother it, but it was already too big, too hungry. The heat slammed against her face, the smoke clawed at her lungs. She heard their laughter outside, cruel, triumphant. Her home, the house her grandparents built, where her memories with James lived in every corner, was burning. She grabbed a photograph from the mantel, clutching it to her chest, coughing, eyes streaming. She forced herself through the back door just before the flames consumed it. She stumbled into the yard, choking, watching as the inferno devoured her home. The roof cracked, timbers groaning like the cries of the past being ripped apart. The Bullies stood at a distance, silhouetted against the orange glow, watching her pain as if it were entertainment. Kyle called out, his voice thick with hatred. "Now maybe you'll get the message. You're nothing. You never belonged here. And your soldier husband can't save you from this." Sarah fell to her knees in the dirt, clutching the photo to her chest, her sobs breaking the silence of the night. She wanted to scream, to fight, to curse them, but all that came out was pain. The fire burned long into the night. By the time the firefighters came, there was nothing left but ashes and smoke. Sarah sat on the ground, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ruins. She didn't cry anymore. She was too empty, too broken. The only thing she could feel was the ache of loss and the echo of their laughter. But what she didn't know was that across the ocean, in a desert somewhere, James felt something too. Soldiers like him sometimes called it instinct, others called it fate. He didn't know why, but his heart clenched that night, as if a storm had reached across the world to touch him. He didn't know yet what had happened, but soon he would. And when he did, the bullies who thought they had won would discover the cost of their cruelty.